Welcome to episode 71 of Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. My guest today is Justin Robert Moore. JR, as he is known, is an American country rock singer-songwriter from Memphis. He is the lead singer and guitarist for the band Ingram Hill and singer and guitarist for the band Allen, Mack, Myers, and more. He is also a solo artist, and his debut solo EP, Rocket, was released in 2018. He says, quote, "I like to sing the songs, play the guitars, and eat the cheeseburgers. 1/3 Ingram Hill, 1/3 Allen, Mack, Myers, and more, 100% JR Moore." Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be
pleasure.
here.
Tell us something interesting about yourself that most people don't know.
Oh, man, that most people don't know. You know what? Well, it depends on how long you've known me, but I think most people think that musician for a living, so he probably is played music all his life, and that's all he does. And quite honestly, I didn't start playing guitar till I was just about out of high school, about the time I met you, and played sports most of my life, and had I been blessed with bit better speed and more height, I probably would have tried to pursue that and played sports well into being an adult before I started tearing up my knees. So that's probably what most people would not think.
You grew up in Memphis, Cordova area, and you went to Mount Pisgah Elementary and then Houston High School, where I know you played basketball there.
Yep.
What are some of the best memories you have of your childhood?
Oh, man. It's weird now that I have kids, and we talk about this all the time, that my son's 8, my daughter's 10. And at that age, my parents literally would just go outside, ride your bike to your friend's house. Like, there was a 7-Eleven that was a mile away in Countrywood, and that was like the limit. Like, don't go past the 7-Eleven. And that was like, as an 8-year-old on a bicycle, don't go past the 7-Eleven a mile away. We don't let our kids go around out of sight around the corner now in our neighborhood. And so, I think that being able, I was in the same elementary school and middle, K through 8, same, high school, 9 through 12. So it was awesome to have. It was great that I had a base level of people I knew my whole life, basically. Was lucky enough to just be able to, in a safe environment and safe neighborhood, that my parents could literally just say, "Go play. I'll see you when the sun goes down." And that, it's kind of great.
That is great. And I grew up the same way, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
Right. It's not the same thing now.
No, not at all. You went to school at the University of Memphis, where you started off, you studying music the first year, and then you changed your major to marketing. What led you to do that?
I was in high school. I was a trained classical singer. And I started at U of M with both a academic and vocal performance scholarship. And I was a vocal performance major. And about halfway through the first semester, I figured out that a few things. Number one, what in the world am I going to do with a vocal performance degree besides teach? Number two, I don't really like singing opera music or an Italian arias. It's not my jam all that much, and it's just not what my voice is suited for. It's possible that it was influenced at the same time that I was starting to play in a band and play at clubs and stuff, and realized that could be more enjoyable. And I might be better at that than I was at the path I was doing. And so I figured out pretty quickly that a vocal performance major was not just singing opera music and then doing that. And then, all right, now I teach voice, it's just not what I had in mind for what I wanted to do. And I figured out that marketing and being able to sell and promote was something I was already kind of good at, and would also tie into being if I wanted to be a professional musician and be in a touring rock band. That was something that would be beneficial, I thought, in the process, not just on the here I know how to sing and write a song or play an instrument. I mean, whether people like it or not, basically a traveling t-shirt salesman that
That's
just
right.
sings some songs on the side. So it seemed like it was a good move.
You started singing as a little kid for your family in the den and at church, and you said, quote, "I'm not totally sure I know exactly when I discovered music. I was just always into it. Though I do vividly remember at 14, and in the midst of believing my parents were complete idiots and not cool at all, my dad brought me into his room and played me Steppenwolf, Janis Joplin, and Jerry Jeff Walker records. And it was blowing my mind that my dad owned cool music," unquote. Love that. You just talked about you didn't start, playing guitar until you were senior at Houston. How did you pick it up so quickly and become really good? Because, when I met you, which wasn't long after that, you
No,
were good.
I think it was a forced thing. We had a high school band together, and all I did was sing. That's all. I didn't play an instrument at all. And at the guy who was our acoustic guitar player and rhythm guitar player, just like anything, I mean, he was leaving to go to college. And so it was like, well, we can either hire somebody or you can learn it. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And then once I started, I was like, okay, number one, there was a few things I picked up quickly and it was like, all right, well, this sounds great. And this is fun. I just need to keep working on this. And we have shows booked. So it's a matter of, hey, we need you to know how to do this because we need this in the show now. And so it was a bit of, I work good under deadlines as opposed to just freely like, hey man, just finish it when you finish it. That does not work for me. I need hey, I need this done by this time. At which point, when there's a show on the horizon and I need to know how to play 10 songs on guitar before I get there, and I've never played guitar before, it became, I was kind of under some fire there to figure it out pretty quickly. And then once it started going, it's like anything, repetition, and just keep doing it and get more comfortable with it. And away we went.
You met Phil Bogard back at Mountain Pisgah, and when the two of you were at Memphis, you formed the band, the Bamboozlers, and you said, quote, "the worst name in the history of band names," unquote. Where did y'all come up with that name?
Dude, we were stuck. My buddy and one of my other childhood friends, a guy named Steve Rhodes, who we basically started the band together, the original thing. That's who I started playing with, around coffee shops when we were darn near in middle school. And he played piano and I just sang. And one thing we were not good at was figuring out band names or album titles or just labeling something was not, we were not great at that yet. And so we went through just brainstorming band name after band name and just nothing stuck. And at which point I think one of his buddies or a coworker of his was like, "Man, y'all," it was like a big old redneck. He's like, "You just call yourself the Bamboozlers." And we thought it was hilarious. And we're like, "That's great. It's just funny and sounds silly." And then, when you're 17 and it's the 90s, you're like, "Oh, this is ridiculous." There's a lot of stupid band names of that are working, the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. Like, how does that become a band?
Right.
A successful band. We're like, well, if that works, what's stopping the name the Bamboozlers from being successful? Except it was a ridiculous name. And so in hindsight, it was pretty silly. But at the moment, we thought it was hilarious. We thought that sounds so ridiculous that people will remember that, and they didn't.
It caught my attention.
There we go. That's true. At least that.
Yeah, the last year that I had my old live music bar at the library, it was, 1998. You guys played many a Wednesday night there, and for a relatively new band, you drew a huge crowd. The place was packed out. I remember there's so many bands that would have died to have the kind of following that you guys had really quickly. And just in a couple of years, they would have loved to have that, and you guys had it quickly.
Yep.
What do you attribute that to?
Honestly, I don't know. It was. I don't know. I wish I could pinpoint it because I would try to duplicate it with other things or tell other people how to do it. Something struck, whether it was because it's not like we were all that great. I think we just we had a couple guys who could sing and we could sing harmonies, and I think that was different for dudes our age at that time. And we were kind of mixing in originals and covers. I think there weren't a lot of guys playing originals at that point, probably. At least not a ton. I mean, maybe older than us, but it's 18-year-olds. There probably weren't a lot of them.
That's true.
And I think 80s cover bands at the time were like super hot, and we were doing the covers we played were current mid 90s, late 90s covers. And I don't think anybody else was doing that either. And so I think the mix of all that, plus I think I told everybody I knew at all times when we were playing shows that I think like a mix of constant self-promotion and all that. That's what I'm guessing. That's the only thing I can put my finger on it as to, because as we started surrounding the area, whether when we first started playing frat parties and sorority parties and whatnot, still the majority of the bands who were crushing it in that world at that time and making a boatload of money were all your 80s cover bands like the Velcro Pygmies and US and bands identical to that. And we were like, what is happening? This is not our jam. I think that just wasn't our generation. And so we did not want to play those songs. And I think probably to our benefit that we, stopped doing or weren't trying to copycat that, I guess is what made it to where people would come out. I wish I knew. Maybe if we didn't make people's ears bleed, they're like, we can drink beer and it won't hurt our ears. We'll do that. I don't know.
It worked. And,
it worked.
Speaking of marketing, that name that you guys decided on, corny but catchy. It's a name that sticks.
Yes.
And that's important. It's sort of like when I had my store Sleepy Z's, corny but catchy.
Course.
And that's the kind of thing I remember. I used to get probably 10 to 20, back then it was mostly cassette tapes and CDs, each day to go through, for bands that wanted to come through and play. And the name is what made me listen to yours because I didn't listen to all of them. And,
there we go.
I can't remember if you mailed it to me or if you brought it to me one day, but either way, I listened to it and I said, I like that. And it was catchy. And so it caught on.
That works out. I literally just told my wife, I was like, I'm doing Mike Zellner's podcast tomorrow. And she was like, the mattress guy? And I was like, yeah, or the old owner of the library. That's how I know him. But she remembered. She was like, I remember Sleepy Z's. I like the name. Yeah, I guess there's something in the name. It catches. And so
catches you. Exactly.
I guess whatever. I still get people. Still to this day, I'll be on stage playing a show and I'll hear just a random voice in the crowd go, the Bamboozlers. And I'm like, great. Oh my gosh.
That's great.
So apparently it did strike a chord somehow.
In 2000, the band broke up and you and Phil got together with another friend of yours from elementary school, Shay Soul. He played bass, and then you got your roommate, Matt Chambliss, to play drums, and you formed the band Ingram Hill. Yep. And you guys almost immediately, were on the road playing clubs and regionally, and then you end up going around the country. What was it about the four of you that worked so well from pretty much, the very beginning where you felt like, we have some really good potential here?
Phil's been one of my best friends since kindergarten. Like we met a week before we started kindergarten. Our grandmothers lived across the street from each other. We have been together for basically our whole lives. One of the benefits, with detriments and benefits, is that the detriment is that it caused us to argue all the time. We were total opposites from our music, what we grew up liking, what our opinions were on it, on hygiene, on literally everything we would disagree on. But like in a loving way, not like I hate you, but like in a it's just in a loving way. And I think some of that contrast worked, and the contrast without anger and confrontation worked for our style and our music, to where I liked pop music and he liked old, guitar rock. And so mashing that together for creating like pop rock songs, like totally worked out. And we were pretty adamant about work. We kind of figured out that getting out and playing as many shows as possible and working was better for us. I don't think that works the same anymore with the way the internet is, that you can, and YouTube, and you can. I don't think the club hustle necessarily is the same path that you can duplicate now. But at that point, just making the rounds, pick your circle and just beat the ever living stew out of it, was what we were trying to do. And we were lucky. Our manager at the time, we a guy named Jim Green, who,
I remember Jim.
God bless him, he rubbed some people the wrong way, but he also was a smart dude and knew how to market and knew how to break a band at that time. And he always, one of the things he beat over us was the best way. He goes, what's going to work for you guys, and what nobody else realizes, is that the best way to get big in Memphis is to get out of Memphis and to get big not get out of Memphis, but to get big around Memphis. And so we played Oxford, Starkville, Little Rock, Jonesboro, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Nashville. I mean, just the circle around. So all these kids who were our age who went off to college, we played their clubs in their college towns, and then Holiday Town came around. Everybody came back home. We'd play a holiday show in Memphis, and it's huge. And the club owners are like, who is this band and what is happening? Well, of course, when you have a who is this band thing, well, that's like a buzzword. And everybody's like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean who is this band? And then people start talking, and then it just spreads. And so I think, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons that worked. That plan of try to get big around Memphis before you get big. Don't grow inside out. Try to grow outside in. Seemed to work for us at the time. And again, we were the same age as the college kids who were coming to watch us, which also I think helped. It made us relatable to our audience. And so I'm guessing that's one of the reasons. Again, I also don't think we made people's ears bleed.
Right.
When I listen to old recordings, it makes my ears bleed. but
right.
But at the time, I think maybe we sounded okay, and had a few, like a couple good songs of our own songs that, people could download off Napster, share with all their friends.
Right.
And then played some good covers. And that was the way we went for a while.
Speaking of being, relatable to your fans, there was an article in the Arkansas Times entitled "Ingram Hill, Not Just Pretty Faces." It was talking about you guys playing at the former Juanita's in Little Rock. And it said, quote, "In Ingram Hill's previous shows, here we've seen the front of the stage lined with doe-eyed young females picking out which band member they'd like to take home. Not to mention random etchings on the bathroom wall in loopy, girly handwriting stating simply, 'I heart Ingram Hill,' unquote." Did you guys encounter that type of reception, frequently as you toured around? Because 4 young, good-looking guys playing music.
I mean, it did not hurt. That was certainly helpful. That is what it is. We certainly tried to market ourselves towards women. Again, it was accidental and on purpose. That we always said, if you can get the girls to show up, the dudes will follow. At which point you just doubled your ticket sales.
And then marketing degree.
That's that marketing again. And so we marketed ourselves towards women, and it's sometimes it worked. And then if you could get the dudes to buy tickets to follow to try to hang out with those girls, then hopefully a bunch of them will be like, oh, well, these guys aren't so bad. And then now you have them both. And
Absolutely.
So it's kind of what we were going for. But yeah, no, we were somewhat known for. I remember there were some fraternity guys that would always be like, well, we saved up for you guys because we knew we were at least going to have one party where a bunch of girls showed up at our frat house.
Smart.
Like, yes, perfect.
Very smart.
We did it.
That's awesome. Ingram Hill released the band's debut AP Until Now in 2002. It sold over 10,000 copies, and you started to make some noise in the music industry. And then just a couple of years later, you released your full-length compact disc, June's Picture Show. It was originally it was released on an independent label, and then Hollywood Records re-released it as part of the new major deal for the band. The album sold 60,000 copies, and I'm sure those numbers are probably higher now. Had to be a really exciting time for you guys. And what was going through y'all's mind as the band was becoming more successful on a national basis?
It was both surreal, awesome, and then also at the same time, like, how do we take the next step? It's hard. People always say, don't take what you're doing for granted, be sure, take in what you're doing and appreciate what is happening right now, because not everybody gets to do this. And, I think we kind of did that some, because you're here and you want to be here. And then once you're here, you want to be here, and it keeps going. And so but at the same time, you're like, I cannot believe we're recording here at this studio, that we're sharing the stage with these guys, that I just, whether it be, I just got introduced to Brian May from Queen. He was like, hey, that was a great job on the cover song of ours on our compilation. I'm like, Brian May knows who I am. Oh my gosh. It's like, it's weird stuff like that. You're like, I cannot believe this is happening. And then you're like, but hey guys, can we push our next single, please? The label, so it's like both awesome and frustrating, because you're constantly trying to climb even higher and climb even higher. But it was pretty incredible. I mean, we got to do and experience, a lot of stuff that most of the bands in the world never get to. And so I do not hold that lightly. At the same time, we always trying to, just trying to climb bigger and bigger. So you don't get the fully, perspective is everything. Right. Now that I'm a grown man with kids, I look back at my 23-year-old self. I'm like, you're an idiot. But what you don't know it at 23.
Right. Well, Ingram Hill doesn't enter hell-raising gray old young man stereotypes, and their lyrics have a tendency to become reflective, unquote. Two of the songs from June's picture show, Will I Ever Make It Home and Almost Perfect, both charted in Billboard's top 25 adult contemporary hits. Tell us a little bit more about those songs and the meaning behind them.
Well, Almost Perfect, our guitar player, wrote that one. And it was about, he wouldn't always let this out. He used it when he needed to use it for his own purposes. But it was about one of his ex-girlfriends. Like, totally, like it was the moment that, like, they were, as an ex-girlfriend who was now dating somebody else, but still on the occasion would, as two exes do, find themselves together again here and there. Right. Will I Ever Make It Home actually became, it was a very melodramatic song I wrote about being stuck out of town. And like literally, it's like in the literal sense. And it became, it's kind of awesome. It's one of those songs that became whatever the listener, however they ended up relating to it with their own situation, whether it be somebody in the military. It became a big one with military people, or with a relationship that, like, that of people separated, which I thought was pretty fantastic. You can only dream of, like, one of your songs ending up like that, where people find their own ways to relate to it, even if it's not the initial meaning of the song. But it was literally, I was stuck overseas and had all kinds of difficulties getting back to the United States. And I was so mad about it. I was like, and just whining basically, but it came out in a song and then worked out on our favor. But
Phil writes a song about his ex, and I think that your first song that you wrote was about a girl, back in high school. And she never heard the song?
She never did. Nope. Never will. To be fair, it's not a very good song. But at the time, when it's the first one and you're in high school, you're like, oh man, I just wrote a song about a girl. And you're like, well, you know what? Let's keep workshopping. See if we can get anything
that
better.
Makes sense. The band's songs have been included in several movies, television. You guys have toured with many national acts over the years, including Hanson, Maroon 5, Better Than Ezra, Hootie and the Blowfish, and Lisa Marie Presley. What kind of receptions did you get from the crowds when you opened up for those major acts? And what did you learn most from, playing with those bands, those experiences?
You know what? Most of those were great. We were lucky that we were a pretty versatile band, that we could open up for just about anybody, or be on a bill with just about anybody and do okay. I mean, and have a good reception. For the most part, there were a few that weren't great, like opening for David Allen Coe. Did not go well for us. But for the most part, we could open up for country acts or harder rock acts, and everything in between, and it all worked out. And so Also, again, a surreal experience, uh, being being on tour with these people that you listen to growing up in middle school and high school, and you're like suddenly you have their phone number,
Right.
and you hanging out with them, after a show, which is kind of a wild deal. But you pick up things along the way. I mean, there's most people get to that level for a reason because they're good at what they're doing. And so you pick up even the little subtleties of like, oh, I see what he did at this part of the show to where he gets the crowd to kick up a notch. And it seems so obvious when when you say whatever it is, but like in the execution, it's the timing and the execution of it that is that a lot of times is the key thing. If you just after the second song, you start trying to pull out some tricks, it's too early. You got to know when to pull those tricks out. And so seeing some of these guys do that, and see them make some choices that of what works with a crowd, you're like, oh, I would have never guessed that one thing would be what really kicks the show over the edge. Or even production, tricks, whether it be like how you set up your back line or a little light, some lights you put in a stage and have blinders show up just at this one spot. It's small things like that a lot that help.
Absolutely. Sometimes it is. It's all about the little things.
Yep.
In 2007, you guys released your second album, Cold in California, again on the Hollywood label. And you said, quote, "Our first record, we had the tools to edit as much as we wanted to edit and make it sound absolutely perfect. And that's what we did. But in doing that, we kind of took the human element out of making a record. It no longer sounded like four guys in a band playing rock and roll songs. This record fixes all that," unquote. What did you like most about that album that made it, pretty special?
It was our first. It was kind of a neat deal. It was our first like real budget major label record, so we had a lot of tools at our disposal. We also had perspective because for the most part, everything we had done up until June's Picture Show, everybody we worked with was trying to capture the live four guys in a band playing rock songs, and try to capture that and put it on an album. And for whatever reason, it never worked. We just never fully got it. And then we made June's Picture Show, and with a guy named Rick Beato, and he went, "Okay, I see what you're trying to do, but this is what I do, and if we put this together, I promise you it's going to work." And he was right. We made a record that we're really proud of, but it's also like super edited. Like it is on the grid. It is absolutely perfect. And even now, even Rick learned from that. Like he didn't always make records like that, but at that point, that's what he did. And so we were attempting to go just to loosen it up a little bit, to still have a great sounding record, but just kind of just make it a little where you can shake your hips a little more. And so I think that was the goal of Cold and Cali. I think we actually did a pretty good job of that. I think that record still, like, we got great guitar tones. I think the record sounds awesome. And it doesn't sound like it's just square and super rigid. I just feel like it's got a little more looseness to it. I think the songs are good. I mean, that's one of those that like, it was a tough to make that record because we had never, like I said, that was our first major label record where we were on the label from start to finish, which adds a lot of cooks to the kitchen that we had never previously had. Whether it be, mostly folks from the label that like want to have their opinions in there too. And you're like, hold up. And so the process of making it was lengthy and frustrating at times, but the end result, I think, ended up being something we're really happy with.
Is there a lot more pressure on a band, obviously, at that point in time when you get to that that area?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, there's now real dollars and real man hours being spent on you. That it's not just you working your band. There's a whole team of people trying to sell your band and work your band and think about you and your band and how to sell your band and how to make you successful and how to get you to the next level. And so not only is money being spent on that, people are working on that. It's not, it's like real people are working on that. And so there's a lot of pressure to like deliver in that moment. And so, yes, it's very different. The way different vibe going into that than just like when you're on the independent role and you're like you're hungry and you're on the independent, and so there's pressure on that because you're trying to make it.
Right.
But it's a very different vibe, totally different.
Speaking of David Allan Coe, for the younger audience that doesn't know, he started off playing blues before transitioning into country music, and several big hits back in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And his music is, still pretty popular today. And one night Ingram Hill was opening for him. And right after you started playing, the crowd begins to boo. I'm sure this is probably what you were referring to.
It was.
Tell the
Yeah.
audience the sort of funny story of what the bar manager said to you that night and what he handed you to have up on stage.
That was the first time. That's maybe the first and only time we almost ever got booed off stage. Like that is probably the worst reception as a performer I've ever had on a stage. It was unreal. They stood like people usually trying to smash their way to the front of the stage or the room to get as close to the stage as possible. This was the opposite. They were as pushed back as far back away from us as they possibly could be. After we played every song, they would be like, "You mean you're not done yet?" I'm like, man, we're contracted to play for 45 minutes. We're gonna play for 45. I mean, every song, it was like, and dudes threatening to throw stuff at us. It was pretty hostile. And then as we walked off stage, a bar back walked over to Phil, our guitar player, was like, handed him a switchblade. I was like, "Hey man, just like for the next half hour or so, you should probably hang on to this just in case." And I was like, where are we? What is happening right now? So that was a rough one. I mean, thanks for a great story, and the memory is incredible. But it was pretty tense in the moment.
Where was that show?
Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Lincoln Theater. Remember it like it was yesterday.
So one time the band went to Disney World. You guys got the star treatment there. You were driven around to every ride. You got to skip to the front of each line. And on the dinosaur ride at Animal Kingdom, please share with us the funny story of what happened at the end when the big dinosaur jumped out.
Oh man, it's like one of those moments. I think those moments are like what shows your true inner soul. And my God, and it's like basically a kid's ride. There's like one big scare at the end, and the big, and everybody's waiting for it. It's where they get the photographic moment to where they, the light flashes and there's a T-Rex and the big loud roar. And I guess I hadn't done enough theme parks at that point. I didn't have kids, so it had been a minute, and I squealed like a little girl and grabbed and locked arms with Phil sitting next to me as if I was a teenage girl going to the ride with my boyfriend. And it was the most emasculating and humiliating thing I'd done in public, maybe ever. I was like, oh no, I will never hear the end of this. But man, it got a great laugh out of everybody.
I bet it. I'm sure you're very happy that it wasn't recorded by any
Oh
iPhone.
man, so glad. Like that is another chalk another one on the list of moments. I'm so glad smartphones were not around when that happened.
So, Jared, you have a lot of good friends in your life, and I'd love to hear about your friendship, with a couple of them. And you just mentioned one. Tell us about Phil Bogard, who you've known most of your life, and
Sure.
also like to hear about Zach Byers and your friendship with him, who you've known obviously through a big part of your music career. And what they've meant to you.
Sure. I mean, like I said earlier, Phil and I met a week before we started kindergarten. We were in school together at Mount Pisgah, and he actually moved away to Pennsylvania for I think in sixth grade or sixth or seventh grade. He moved away to Pennsylvania, but we kept in touch because our grandmothers lived across the street from each other, and so every time he'd come in town to visit, we would see each other. And he had moved back to, his dad worked for Pringles. And so they moved back to Jackson, Tennessee, like his senior year of high school. And so, Houston played against his school in basketball. So I did see him around then, but we lived in Jackson. So we still weren't like really close, but we were friends. And he ended up back at University of Memphis and ran into a guy, our drummer for the Bamboozlers at the time. We just happened to be looking for a guitar player. And I totally just because I didn't see him every day, I'd forgotten that he even played guitar. And then we're back in the band together, or we're back hanging out every day. He's now in the band. We do Ingram. We tour the world with Ingram together. And people ask all the time, like, because we don't, as far as Ingram Hill dates, we do one-offs and stuff, but we don't do a lot of touring. I get asked almost every time I go play a show that's not an Ingram Hill show. They're like, do you still talk to the guy? You still talk to Phil? I'm like, actually, I talk to Phil maybe every other day. We text like all the time. He lives in Nashville. We still talk all the time. And so he is of no stranger to me, even though we are not touring in a band together all the time. And so it's kind of great. I mean, he is by far my oldest friend. And not even one of those we're like, oh, he's my old friend from school or whatever. Like, we still regularly speak, which is pretty great. And he's doing fantastic for himself. And he's got his own great story. That works for Rock to Recovery, which is for substance abuse. It helps through music to where he goes into rehabilitation centers and has in group settings. They write and record a song start to finish in the session, which is, it's pretty awesome that people who are not in their best moments at that time get to not think about that moment for a minute and actually get to be creative and do something that possibly they've never done. And so right. I love it. I'm super proud of him for what he's doing with that right now. And then old boy Zach Myers. I met Zach when we were both teenagers. I think he's 4 years behind me, 4 or 5. I think he's 4 years younger than me. And we were, I guess there weren't, like when we were both coming up, there weren't a lot of teenagers playing clubs locally. And so you kind of end up meeting each other because of that. It's just for a shared circumstance. But we weren't like great friends as teenagers. We just knew each other. And then, as we just get older, we run into each other some more. And then there was a moment where he tour managed Ingram. He was out touring with us. I think he might have been the bass player for Shinedown at this point. Although Shinedown wasn't what Shinedown is now. And so he came out TMing for us and introduced us and brought along our buddy Chris Allen, who is now the Allen and Allen McMyers Moore. And so Chris was guitar teching. Zach was tour managing. We were having a big time on tour together. and then Shinedown blows up. They have Second Chance. It goes crazy. But we're still good friends. And then, probably maybe 2014-ish, 2013, 2014, he, in between Shinedown runs, he's doing like these little acoustic runs with either by himself or with a friend. And our buddy Zach Mack, he had asked Zach to do a tour, and at pretty last minute, Zach backed out. And he called me and was like, "Hey man, what are you doing for the next 3 weeks? You want to do an acoustic run?" And I was like, "Yeah, sounds great." And from that moment on, we've become way closer friends. Got in a side project band together. I also play in Smith and Myers with him. And then our families are now great friends. Our kids love each other. When we do our friend get-togethers, it's at his house or my house, or it's now part of the friend family circle. It's a weird deal that, when I was 19 and he was 15 playing on Beale Street, if you could fast forward 20 years, be like, this is what your life's going to be. Right. Like, what? That seems unlikely, but here we are.
It's your drummer running into Phil. I talk about this a lot. Synchronicity, things are happening the way they're supposed to happen, and how things work out. And Zach starting off, helping you guys and managing you guys, and then how that happened. You started going out 3 weeks out on the road with him. I can imagine you guys became pretty close there.
Yeah,
so
for
things
sure.
Worked out great.
It really did. You're so right. It's like timing. Timing is such a weird deal and you can't force timing. Like it just happens how it happens. It's just right place, right time. And there have been a lot of moments and those friendships, and just the whole thing of like, Phil was back in Memphis and we did not see each other. He just so happened to run into my drummer at a party and we just so happened to need a guitar player. And then that changed the course of my life, was that moment. And so it's just such a weird deal, but
Absolutely.
so true.
So Ingram Hill released, 3 more albums over the years on
Mhm.
Rock Ridge Music, and still performs, as you said, a little bit to this day. And you've branched out, after that last self-entitled album. Ingram Hill was released in 2012. You talked about you're part of the acoustic group, Alan, Mack, Myers, and more. And this stat is awesome. The 4 of you combined with your individual bands are responsible for 25 Billboard Rock #1s, a Billboard Top 40 #1, and 7 Billboard Hot AC hits. Those numbers might even be higher now. Shinedown Zach Myers said, quote, "There is no script nor set list. The shows are spontaneous, fun, and full of music and many laughs and stories," unquote. Y'all have a lot of fun out on the road together, don't you?
We do. We do. That is, people say that to us all the time, that like, they go, "You guys look like you're having a blast on stage together." And I was like, you can have an opinion whether you think we suck, we could sound terrible, but there is no debate that we are having a great time on stage together. That you can't, there's no way to talk around that. And I think that it's infectious. It's hard to watch somebody have fun and not have fun yourself. And so I think that helps us out. But we really enjoy getting to do that and getting to play together. It's such a different thing for all of us. And it's always so fun. And if, like I said, our resume is pretty good amongst the 4 of us. And when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter. It's
right.
Whether you're any good, the 4 of us together, and whether you're enjoying it. And if nothing else, we absolutely are enjoying ourselves.
You said, quote, 18 years ago, my band Ingram Hill went on tour opening for a band called Hanson. It was pretty amazing, an eye-opening tour with both the talent of the band and the darn near unmatched passion of their fans. We got lucky enough to do it again for a minute in 2007, and then life goes on. And then 15 years later, some wild stars aligned, and I'm back out opening for Hanson with a different band, Alan, Mack, Myers, and more, and on an instrument I don't exactly play, bass, yet the constants remain. The band is still awesome. Their fans are still as passionate as ever, unquote. It goes into what we talked about, synchronicity. Share with the audience, if you would, a little bit more about the tour with Hanson and, what feelings that had to be going through you, thinking, God, I was with these guys, 15 years ago, and everything sort of come full circle.
Sure. I mean, the original tour with Hanson, that was 2004. And I mean, I remember our manager at the time pitching it to us, and me being an idiot. But being a typical early 20s dude who, when Hanson became famous, I was like a high school dude. And so there's not a lot of high school dudes who liked Hanson when they became, there was children with a song called Bop. And I remember telling my manager specifically, I'm not going on tour with Bop. And he was like, and he said, trust me, they're doing great numbers. Just trust me on this. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. And I remember the first sound check with House of Blues, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I walked in to watch their sound check, and I was like, I was wrong. Oh my gosh, these guys are awesome. The band, just the band itself. I mean, if you look at it logically, it makes sense. It's 3 brothers who all sing incredibly, and they have been singing together their entire lives. So together, they're going to sound amazing, and they do. But you just still they have the stigma of being what made them famous, which was a song they wrote when they were children. But they have continued on and became adults and write adult songs, and they're still awesome at it. They're still great songwriters and can perform amazingly. On top of that, their fan base, it's almost like especially then, it's like almost like a mini Grateful Dead. These girls they'd work a job 9 months of the year, save the money, quit the job so that they could follow the entire Hanson tour. And they would be at the shows before. They'd be camped out outside of venues. And it doesn't matter whether it was safe or not. They were there, camped out, sleeping overnight outside of a venue in downtown Philadelphia or wherever. And there'd be 600 girls there before we got there for load-in. There'd be a line down the street, around the block when we would show up for load-in. Because it was GA seating and they wanted to be in the front. And so that was our introduction to Hanson. You're like, oh my gosh. And also career changing. Like that fan base is incredibly passionate about that band. And they also have strong opinions about the openers for Hanson. And if they like you, that passion shifts. I mean, well, you know, you get like sucked in. It's almost like getting sucked into the passion vortex. And so you're like part of the Hanson, or as they call it, the Fanson. You're like part of the Fanson family. And so for Ingram, I mean, that was great for us. From that moment on, when we went and did headlining shows, it was people who saw us on the Hanson tour that were now coming to our shows and buying our records. And it was awesome. And but then, you know, like I said, life goes on. You know, bands go this way, the other bands go this way. The Hanson guys and their crew were always so nice to us, but like again, life goes on. Zach Myers happens to also be friends with the Hanson guys, and they, you know, Shinedown and Hanson is not really a bill that's going to get put together. Most likely. I mean, maybe it will. I don't want to say never, but it's just unlikely. But we have this side project, Alan Mack Myers Moore. And I think, and Zach Myers, talking to the Hanson guys, I think had made them aware of that. And out of nowhere, I mean, we talked about like, he'd been like, hey man, I should try to get us opening for Hanson. I'm like, yes, you should try to get us opening for Hanson. It'd be awesome. We've talked about that for years, and like, it is what it is. And then out of nowhere, and he was like, hey, I've got 2 weeks off in between Shinedown legs. And we just got a Hanson offer for 2 weeks out with them. And I was like, so weird. Like, what in the world? And, you know, as part of like also in Alan Mack Myers Moore, we're all singer-songwriters. So we all mainly are used to playing guitar and singing. But like, there's 4 of us. And somebody has to play bass. And so you can either hire a bass player and bring another dude out with us, or just like one of us plays bass. And I was like, all right, I'll volunteer. I'll be the guy. And so, you know, that's not an instrument I'm accustomed to playing, but you make it work to make the show work, because we bring out a drummer and we want to play full band. And, you know, it's weird. Like day one, you show up and it's like, oh, I remember you from the other band from a long time ago. It's like, yeah, hey, good to see you again. And it's like you become old friends all over again. It was such a weird, like, you know, the circle just comes all the way back around to get to do it all over again. And now you're back in that world, and there are people showing up to these shows that are like, you know, come up to me after shows at the merch table that are like, I remember you from 2004. I love Ingram Hill. Cool. I'm so glad to see you again. It happened a lot, way more than I would have expected. And so it was pretty awesome, pretty surreal. Again, you know, just like, what are the odds of that happening again? And yet here we are.
You know, you've also delved into the sporting world. You've sung the national anthem, you know, for the Tigers in both basketball and football, I believe. And then a little over 4 years ago, you guest hosted on 92.9 ESPN radio here in Memphis for the Gary Parrish Show, you know, #1 rated drive time afternoon show in the Mid-South. How did that come about? And, you know, what was it like, you know, for you to, you know, first time hosting a sports radio show?
It was terrifying. Like I hear them, like the guys who host those shows, I hear them tell you all the time, like they'll meet people in public and people be like, man, I know everything about sports. That job is so easy. I could talk about sports for 2 hours. And like, you know, you can talk about sports for about 7 minutes into a microphone when you're talking into the abyss. And now you have an hour and 53 minutes to go. Of talking about more things, and be entertaining, and try not to keep people from turning the radio, you know, the dial, to go to somewhere else. So terrifying, #1. That was the first thing, especially being totally inexperienced at that. But that came about. Brad Carson, who is the program director of 92.9, he was the program director for 94.1 The Buzz back in the day, which was a local Memphis station, and that played Ingram Hill a bunch. And so we knew each other from then. I've known him for, you know, almost 20 years. And I think they were doing at the time, and during the summers when Gary would go on vacation, they would do Celebrity Host Week. I don't know why he thought I was a big enough celebrity to do that, but he called me and I was like, absolutely, yes, this is yes and yes. I'm into it. And so I did it, and it was awesome and terrifying, and it both goes super slow and flies by at the exact same time, which is a weird contrast, but it's the truth. It's really weird how it happens. And then during COVID, I started a what I called the Monday Night Concert Series. It was a weekly Monday night show where I sang and spoke into a camera with, to literally whoever was watching, but no visual feedback of another face or human or whatever. And I think Brad, again, saw that. And so when some of the hosts went on vacation, he asked me to come do guest host again. And so for the Jason and John show, I did a week of shows of a 3-hour radio show on the Jason Sports Talk Radio, on the Jason and John show, which again, 2 hours is one thing. 3 hours is a whole different animal. But luckily Brad was there with me and kind of he was my training wheels, but it was, again, terrifying and awesome. And by the end of the week, you start to feel comfortable with it. You're like, all right, I can do a radio show. But it was in the summertime where you have nothing to talk about. So we're doing French fry rankings, and luckily I love food. So I can talk about French fry rankings and cheeseburgers and who has the best barbecue. I can fill some segments with that. And then got to do it again on a Thanksgiving break where there were actually sports going on that we could talk about. And that was fun too. So it was both. It was awesome. It was a little weird and surreal, but totally, I felt honored that Brad asked me to trusted me to come fill in for hosts that are really good at their jobs, and that to trust me enough with the show to be like, all right, come talk for 3 hours on our airwaves, and we think you can do it. And so it was also really neat and a totally different thing for me, which was awesome.
I was very privileged enough to have both Brad and Gary on, so, on my podcast.
That's awesome.
So far, separately, and had really good shows with both of them. And I know Gary talks about how much preparation goes into those shows.
Oh, dude, it's incredible. You just you hear people say it and you're like, all right, I got it. You got to prep. I spent more time. The amount of time I spent doing prep work and even writing the entire opening segment, writing a script, so that I'm not fumbling through just as the energy starts and you're and you don't start stuttering and fumbling through your words. I'm reading off a screen, the opening script, so I know what to say. And then the amount of sports you watch, and then the amount of stuff to find interesting stories that are sure, you can watch all the sports you want, but who cares about a Milwaukee Bucks Timberwolves game in the city of Memphis, or if the biggest story is hockey? Well, nobody cares about hockey here. So why am I going to talk about hockey on a Memphis Sports Talk radio show? You're not. I know a lot about soccer, but nobody cares about soccer here. And so I'm not going to talk soccer on a Memphis. And so the prep work of searching for something interesting to talk about, and then actually knowing what you're talking about, not just bringing up a topic and then not have anything to say about it. So the prep work is really, all the legwork is in the prep work. And then you just hope you could speak about it entertainingly and sound like you know what you're talking about.
You said this was one of the favored messages that you've ever gotten. It said, quote, "Are you the Justin Moore that is a country singer? If so, man, you're my cousin by marriage. You married my cousin. I don't know her, but I know her last name was McDaniel and her dad's name is Dongles," unquote. Now, I read that exactly as it was worded, including the great punctuation.
That's exactly right. None.
Can't imagine how many times that's happened to you.
So much. There's not a lot of people thinking I know their dad Dongles, but I cannot tell you the amount of times that people thought I was the country singer Justin Moore, to the point that professionally I had to change my name to J.R. Moore. It became too much of a problem, and he became too famous that it's annoying when it happens on Facebook, but when it gets down to actually trying to work and tour and get shows and sell shows with the name, with that name conflict, it became a real problem. And so I eventually just had to change it, which is a bummer. I wish he would have had to change his, but it did not work out that way. But man, that happened a lot. I will remember Dongles for the rest of my life.
Tell us about the Earth Angels charities and the compilation album Wings Volume 1 and how you got
Sure.
involved with it and what it's all about.
Yep. So there's a festival that we actually just played as Alan Mack Moore that I've been playing in different as this festival throughout the years called Rock by the Sea, which it's a lot of the same. I mean, it's a lot of audience that I already play for, and a lot of people who go on this thing called the Rock Boat. But it's a charity or it's a charitable organization that puts on a music festival to raise money for a charity. And then Earth Angel. So one of the people who is a big donator to Rock by the Sea is also wanted to create. She's also a music lover, and so wanted to find a way to how can I be? I'm not a musician, so how can I be more involved with the creation of music? Also, and at the same time, raising money for charity, which is she's passionate about both those things. So Lady Jane Allen created the Earth Angel charity, and decided she would get as many of her favorite artists as she could to write songs together, put them on a record, and then sell that to raise money for the charity. And so that was I just saw her over the weekend, and she could not have been more ecstatic about the outcome of the compilation album, and it was pretty awesome to be part of it. I mean, it was it was asking me to do what I do, write a song and sing it, and hopefully it does the intended purpose of raising the spirits of people who are not doing well and are sick, and also raising awareness and money to help them. And so I think she's already trying to put together Volume 2. And after hearing Alan Mack this is the first time that Alan Mack Moore has played the Rock by the Sea Festival. And again, like, we don't get to play together very often, so it's not everybody gets to see us all the time. And it was her first time seeing that, and she immediately was like, "Okay, well, the four of you did a song for me. Will the four of you do a song for Volume 2?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's put it together. Let's make it happen." So I think we'll be. I think the plan is to be involved in Volume 2 as well.
November 30th, 2018. What a great day for you. You said, quote, "This has been the most exciting record I've made in quite some time. It has a totally different vibe than anything I've ever recorded in the best way possible. I feel like it's the perfect sound for my debut album," unquote. And you also said, quote, "This is a fun day. Thanks to you guys for being a part of it with me and allowing me to sing songs for a living," unquote. And you just referred to that last thing you said, allowing your fans, letting you sing music to them. It makes everything worth it, what you've gone through.
Yep, absolutely. That was, it is not lost on me how lucky I am that my job has been to sing songs for a living. And you can't do it for a living if nobody will listen, and pay for it and buy your records and buy your tickets, and or hire you to come play for their events. It doesn't. You can sing to your voice runs out, but if nobody's willing to listen, then you have to find something else to do for your work. And so I have been incredibly lucky that this has been my job for basically my entire adult life. It was incredible that I even got the opportunity to make a solo record. When Ingram was winding down, I was unsure of what I was going to have happen, and that I've been able to continue as a solo artist to keep working, keep touring, playing shows, and making records, and have the ability to do things differently than I had done it before, and still have an outcome that I not only loved, but that people responded well to, in that my record Rocket, I think, is pretty special. I don't take that for granted. I don't think that entire process was so different, and awesome, and that people were open to the idea of it and not just be like, "Man, I just wish you played with Ingram Hill some more." I'm like, well, yeah, it'd be great if we could all make it. If the world worked out perfectly, yes, I wish that was too. But again, things change, life happens, and that I haven't gotten that response. People have been like, "Yeah, this sounds great. We love it, and we're proud of you, and we will support you." Has been that has been pretty special.
You touched on this, but I wanted to talk about a little bit more about the online concerts that you had on Monday nights. Sometimes it was just you, sometimes it was you were joined by your friends, and you said, quote, well, it started out as a silly weekly thing we did online because we weren't supposed to leave our houses for 2 weeks, became a thing that lasted over 2 years. Even after we could go back out into the world, what a ride. Thanks to you guys for being a part of it. The show doesn't happen if y'all don't show up each and every week and talk to each other like one big happy internet family. The Monday night concert series made it to 100 out of 100 and maybe a few extra sprinkles in there. Amazing. Thank you again. And the finale was a total riot, unquote. So giving of yourself, your time. I know this had to mean a lot to your fans, people that were stuck at home, unsure what was going on in the whole world. Everybody was sort of like, questioning everything. And, it has to have, such a big impact on you, Justin, that you just helped so many people during a difficult time.
Totally. That was, like I said earlier, when you're playing an internet show, a live streaming show, I'm singing into a camera. There is no immediate feedback. I'm like, for the most time, my job is I sing for 3.5 minutes. I get immediate feedback, whether it's good or bad. I get immediate feedback on what people thought of that. And when you finish a song and it's dead silence, and then even if you're trying, I would set up an extra tablet so I could read comments and try to interact with people. Even then, I'm on like a 13-second delay by the time it goes out to the internet and then comes back to me before I can see it. And so it's still like a weird interaction. And that people just ended up started talking to each other and like looking forward to speaking to each other every week as well as having a show and interacting with me. And that even then, some people never commented at all. And like, you get so used to seeing the same names in the comments that it almost feels like they're the only ones watching. And I can't tell you how many times now that we're back out playing shows again, how many people that I never saw their name in the comments or even they'd be like, hey, I loved your Monday night thing. I watched almost every week when we could not go to shows. It was or leave our house. It was so helpful to have this little piece of like of escape from the seriousness or the annoyance of what else is going on in the rest of the world. The far-reaching impact of that I didn't see immediately with the people who were immediately responding in the comments with me. It's weird. Yeah. Like you don't realize it until you start seeing people out in public and they're like, the amount of folks say, oh, I loved your Monday night show. Watched it all the time. I'd be like, wait, really? I never saw you in there. And they're like, well, I didn't comment. I just watched. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess there were people who did that. I didn't think about it. It just became a thing I did. It was, again, if nobody's watching, if it dies out, it dies out, and I never make it that far and it just goes away. And that's that. But that it never died out. People just kept coming back, every week and looked forward to it. It was also not only special, it was weird. Like I was surprised that we were able to put that together. And it's also incredibly special. And it's like, it's really humbling that like something you did helped people or touched people. That's not necessarily the response you're thinking is going to happen when I started doing it. I didn't think that would be, that it was, people's therapy. That was not what I intended on it doing. That it became that, it's really awesome. I became somebody's Monday night television program. That's kind of a cool thing.
Absolutely.
It's a cool thing when I became their habit. When you become somebody's habit that they do every week, they're like, oh, I got to sit down. It's 8 p.m. My stories are coming on and I'm their stories. That's kind of cool. And so, that wasn't lost on me. That was pretty special. And it's still awesome over the weekend, I just saw someone be like, man, I loved your Monday night thing. Are you going to do it again? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's awesome that you still bring it up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because you reach people. It's not just Memphis. I mean, you're thinking
sure.
You're reaching people all over.
Yeah, it's all over the world. I mean, it's a free show on the internet. Anybody can watch, and they did, and it was awesome.
Good for you, man. It's awesome. Your wife, Anna, you guys just celebrated your 14th anniversary on October 11th, I believe. And you said, quote, happy 14th anniversary to this total smoke show sitting next to me. So glad you picked me and still put up with me every day, unquote. Another wonderful thing I want to share is you said, quote, happy Mother's Day to this total babe. She takes care of every breathing thing in this household and I love her. I didn't have a picture of her carrying me, but I'm sure there's one somewhere out there, unquote. How did you guys meet? And tell us a little bit more about her.
Sure. We met in college. We met at University of Memphis. It's kind of wild that she went to Germantown and I went to Houston. Both our dads worked for Malone and Hyde. And like our dads know all the same people. Our dads, matter of fact, right now, our dads go to like either a weekly or a bi-weekly lunch with all their mutual Malone and Hyde friends. And Anna and I had so many mutual friends because she went to Germantown Baptist, and all my friends that I went to Houston with also went to Germantown Baptist. We never knew each other. And I never even heard her name in high school. And it wasn't until college. We just ran around the same circle. And even then, we were just friends. We didn't I didn't like see her and we immediately start dating. We were just friends. And so, but eventually got together in college and have been dated forever, and got married in 08 and went from there. And she's great. She now works at University of Memphis. We have a couple kids together. She keeps this whole thing together. You know, she's got a musician for a husband, like a lead singer at that, right? And everything that comes along with that.
Exactly.
So she does. She's doing the Lord's work, putting up with this dude every week.
I think I recognize her. I think she came in the library because she looks so familiar.
100%.
Yeah.
She told me, she said, thank him for all the beer when you get on the podcast.
Like I said, I saw her picture. I'm like, yeah, I know that because I don't forget anything. I said, I know her. Yeah, she came in the bar. Yeah,
100% was there.
Back when I was serving the 18 to 20-year-olds because you had to.
Because you had to.
You had to. Lucy, Carter, and Presley, your three kiddos. Tell us about them.
Well, you know what? Presley, I call Presley my the adopted dog. She, Presley was she's 12. She's 12. So she's the oldest of the children. I was out of town for a weekend and I came home to find a dog in our house. And I was like, oh, what is this thing? She's like, we have a dog now. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Maybe we could have discussed this ahead of time. We did not. We had a dog then, and now we've had a dog for 12 years. Yeah, but then, you know, kiddos soon followed, and they're awesome. I have an older girl, younger boy. They're pretty terrific. My daughter is an angel. She's a total angel. She's a little book nerd and obeys the rules. And when we had her and she was our only child, we thought we were amazing parents. And then my son was born. He changed all of that. We were no longer, all of our tricks never worked. And he is the lovingest kid in the world, but also a complete handful. But it's pretty great. Pretty awesome.
He's a baseball player too?
Yep. He plays competitive soccer. My daughter's in competitive dance. So, you know, all the taxing my brother and I made my parents do when we were kids. It's now fallen. It's now come full circle and is now on me and Anna. That's basically all we do. We just chauffeur them around town to all their sports stuff.
Awesome. Well, y'all look really happy from all the pictures and things I see. So that's great.
Good for you,
man.
We definitely are. Thank you.
What are the most important lessons you've learned in life?
Whoo, boy. Kindness is never the wrong answer. And that nobody wants to get yelled at. Nobody wants to be difficult, wants you to be difficult. And they don't, you know, everybody's just trying to like make their paycheck and go home to their families and like take care of their families. And so if you can find a way to always be kind and to respect other people, generally, even if people are on edge and not being kind back, it's almost a disarming. If you can find a way to be kind and respectful, it almost becomes a disarming factor, and then they want to do the same to reciprocate back to you. I think that's a big one, is that usually for the most part, kindness is almost always the right answer.
How can people find you and follow your music on social media, including, you know, all three of your projects?
Yep. So all the Ingram Hill stuff, I think everything is at Ingram Hill. That's INGRAM Hill. Ingram Hill. That's on Insta, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. And then for me, all my solo stuff, pretty much everything is J.R. Moore Music. Some jerk already had J.R. Moore on Instagram. I don't think he's posted a picture since 2011. But he stole, that was the first thing I tried to get was J.R. Moore on Instagram. Couldn't get it. And so went ahead and just put my stake in the ground for J.R. Moore Music. So that's YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, J.R. Moore Music. I'm sure there's, I don't know what my Snapchat name is, but it's out there. It's on there somewhere. Same with TikTok. I think TikTok is also J.R. Moore Music. Everything is J.R. Moore. And then I do have a Patreon. Patreon is the only thing that's J.R. Moore. If you're familiar with Patreon, it's basically, for lack of a better way to describe it, it's basically a subscription to me and all my stuff. And so you get extra stuff there. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, if your listeners are interested, I got a Patreon. And then, of course, Alan, Mack, Myers, Moore. I have so many bands. There was a time in my life where I played in one band. Now I play in all the bands. Right. So as I figure, if you don't like one of my acts, I have others you can try.
You go.
You can try to give you my options. It's Alan Mack. Alan is ALLEN. Alan Mack Myers Moore. We're on Spot. All these bands. As I say this, all my bands are on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Deezer, YouTube, whatever weird thing you may subscribe to. We're probably on it. So Alan Mack Myers Moore, also on Facebook and Instagram. I think all of our stuff is AM Official. It takes too long to write out all of our names, so we just do AMMM. AM Official is Instagram and maybe Facebook too. If you can get to AM, if you can Google AMMM, you'll probably find us.
It does come up. Yeah, I did it.
Perfect. There we go. We got
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we met about 24 years ago at the library. Yep. Last time I saw you was in 2016 at the Shinedown concert at the Lander Center. We were all standing out there in the audience, and my memory of you goes exactly to what you just talked about in most important lessons in life. And it was that you were just always incredibly nice. Good people stick out in my mind. It's been great to watch you, watch your career and over the last 20 plus years of music. And you've done some great things and are still doing some great things, and you continue to put out great music. So I just expect even more from you.
Well, thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. It is awesome. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of your podcast. I'm honored that you took the time out to have me on and ask me and invite me and look up stuff to ask questions. I very much appreciate it. I've enjoyed following stuff you're doing too. It's you keep reinventing yourself, and it's pretty awesome. And so it's a pleasure to be here.
Appreciate you. Thanks again for coming on today.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me.
You take care.
All right.